Hello everyone, this is Mr. Nobody, welcoming you to another episode of Making Nobody Happy. And I want to talk quickly to you about power and justification. Now hang with me because I might get a little esoteric here. Okay, so I think that one of the principal problems any person or government or social structure faces is justification for power. Because power is their job. Government or any social institution exists to do something. It's a psychosocial mechanism. Power is their business because they require energy and do work and have function. And justification is the mechanism by which they are able to absorb energy and able to convert it into action and perform their function. Now, power is really just the ability to take action. And it comes in many forms. Action based on decision is the critical ability of humans. It's how we shape the future. Justification and assent is the critical concurrency for allowing it to absorb energy and take that action. Now, power can be gained and justification can be acquired by many different means. By technology, by mythology, by popular sentiment, by social influence. You need some sort of argument, some sort of justification, because the thing that you're ultimately trying to steer is the ability of humans to alter the future based on decided action. And this ability is most powerful when it's aggregated, when the powers of many are attuned to the same decision, the same action, the same future. But how do you manage that? How do you get them all attuned like this? How do you cause that alignment? What currency do you use that allows you to direct them, to feed the energy into this power machine? As I said, there's many types of currency, and therefore there are many pathways to justification. And they change throughout time, what people use and how they use and which society is focusing more on this one or that one. You know, they rise and they fall. But they're all founded in some of the most basic aspects of life and the human personality. So they are generated from the things, the types of things that we are, and that motivate us, and that act as justification to us, that convince us. Now, the argument from vulnerability and positive prejudice is one of the most powerful human instincts. It's one of the best, it's one of the oldest, and it's one of the most irresistible. And its time for supremacy, alone above all others, has come. Now, children are weak and vulnerable, and we are predisposed to a positive prejudice toward them, especially when they're crying and communicating fear and harm. And our natural instinct is the investment of unbounded parental authority into someone to solve that problem. We want someone to take action and fix it. We want them to make things better. We want them to provide for that infant. This is a problem. We hear that noise and it grates on our psyche. We hear the pain. We see children. It's very hard for humans to see childlike things being harmed. Even just representationally childlike things like dolls. It's difficult for people. It's sickening to many people. So it's a very powerful argument. We have this extremely powerful instinct and powerful response. And as I said, well, how do we deal with it? How do we deal with this problem of infant vulnerability? Well, like I said, our instinct is, we are going to create and invest into a monster, basically, a power monster, this unbounded parental authority, someone who is able to solve that problem. It's a little bit like how the Roman government would appoint dictators during a time of crisis. And the most, but what they do? They say, oh, the whole country is in danger. Guess what? We're now a dictatorship. And frankly, you still see that happening. There's a lot less discussion in time of crisis, things like the military. This is not an open forum for discussion. It's follow your orders. It's a complete hierarchy, top-down, absolute hierarchy. And even during coronavirus, you saw a lot of this. It's like, we're not voting on things. We're not discussing these things. We're in an emergency. We're suspending these things. We're doing these things. Enormous investments of responsibility in times of crisis and danger. That's just what people do, because that's our instinct. Now, That's a scaled up version of that. But the most fundamental and instinctive form of that same response is child parent, child guardian. We grant enormous authority, asymmetrical. There's a huge asymmetry in the relationship between the parent and the child, and we just say that's fine. We're going to create that. We have two humans. We're going to create enormous difference. We're saying dictatorship. Fine, sounds good. Huge authority. Fine, they can decide everything from them, down to the very things they can eat, where they can do, stand, sit, talk, sleep. Enormous breadth to the authority, enormous distance in the hierarchy. And we also say, well, you can do almost anything. We excuse almost any protective action that is taken. Anything is okay if it increases safety. This is, again, something that maybe you saw people expressing this sort of feeling, because that is our natural investment of parental power feeling, is like, as long as it makes them safer, as long as it makes the endangered children safer, everything's excused. Like, we totally understand it if it's like, well, their child was in danger, so of course they killed those people, or of course they did that. It's like, we completely understand that. We fundamentally are prejudiced to agree with it. Okay, so this is just something that people do. Have you ever seen a kindergarten teacher? Boy, that's a case of someone who's been granted that guardianship over young children, and they're so much less independent than, say, if you say go watch an 8th grade class. Totally different experience. The 8th graders are kind of like independent little people. Yeah, they're in a structure, but it's totally different from what a kindergarten teacher is doing. You go watch a kindergarten teacher, you are going to see kindness, you're going to see compassion, and you are going to see absolute authority over everything about those kids and what is going on with them and what is going on between them. And that's what the core of this argument is, the argument from child vulnerability. It is one of the most irresistible justifications that it just exists for us. It's in the background of our mind. It's an archetypal thing. It is just there. It exists. It works. It is a feature of human psychology, and it is a feature of all of human society. As I said, is one of the most irresistible arguments. The authority that the argument from child authority grants is just absolute. And the excusable measures that it grants to you are the authority. They're just almost unbounded. You would do anything to protect a child. You would expect people to do anything to protect a child. Arguments with the child, that they become completely unnecessary. Because I said so. Parents can say things like that. Parents can do things like that. They can also say it about their own ability to control what their child's doing. Why? Because I said so. Because I am their parent. Explanations become unnecessary. Voting becomes unnecessary. The authority granted to someone who is parenting a child is greater than any other kind of authority that we allow, basically, in human existence. Why? Because parents assume a responsibility that is unmatched. And so they also assume a sovereignty that is also unmatched. That's something, the responsibility generates the sovereignty. The sovereignty obligates the responsibility. Now here's the tricky bit. That is just in the human brain. It is in the human mind. It is in the human society. And it is just one of those arguments of justification that is out there. And you can hijack that to seize the reins of power in the society. Because this argument doesn't just work with like mothers and children. It can be transposed. It works for anyone who can convince you that they're acting in the place of the parent, that they're acting as a mother, about anyone who you can paint as an effective child. So basically, as long as you can sell yourself as, I am taking this maternal role, and as long as you can sell whoever these people are who are you're about to be given authority over and control over and acting on the good of, as long as you can sell them as children, then you can sell this argument for anyone and anything. Motherhood is a benevolent tyranny. The idea that it couldn't be abstracted or relocated into a political force is absurd. And that's failing to understand from whence all political forces originally derive. All government, all society is the pack, writ large. The pack, the human family, abstracted, expanded, adapted, blown up in these various different ways by these various different means. As I say, you can abstract it and expand it and dislocate, do all these things, adapt it. But you're taking something that's this fundamental built-in thing to the human character and the fundamental organization and just saying, well, we're going to scale that up. We're going to scale that up. We're going to use it on these things. We're going to use that. And so the same justification arguments that worked for the base thing are going to also work on the super huge scaled up, almost unrecognizable, dislocated, abstracted version of the thing, the empire-wide version of thing. And I'm not going to get into the differences with paternalism and maternalism right now. But they're out there. They're both existing forces. You could get into specific political approaches that you might say, well, this one leans more this way and this one leans more that way. Maybe it's enough to just say that it's parental. But I would certainly say that all human relations are familial, either because they're inward facing and internal, or outward facing and external. And those are the two aspects of the family, the twin aspects of the family. I think you see scaled up versions too of paternalistic and maternalistic roles. Law, by its mythological nature, tends to be fundamentally patriarchal. All conservation and transmission of culture tends to be somewhat matriarchal in nature. And you can see that playing out through history too. Now, all of this is super weird. But it is what it is. Humans can't make something out of nothing. We are a particular sort of creature with a particular set of innate abilities and technologies and frameworks that are built into us that we bring to the table, that are deeply tied to our embodied nature. We like to think that we think like the things that we are, which is a very particular thing. It's not just a neutral thing. We think like the very, very particular things that we are. We do not think like dolphins. We do not think like spiders or fungi or lizards. Our sticky little particularly human fingerprints are all over everything that we do. They're really distinctly human. But we're so deeply embedded within that nature that we can't actually imagine it as everything other than everything, as just everything is perfectly ordinary, perfectly independent, default, in no way saturated with our unique character and stamp. But that's just wrong. Like a lizard of similar intelligence with us would not think like us or organize society like us or build a civilization like us, because they would not be operating from remotely similar innate psychological and archetypal foundations. And you are always operating, whether you know about them or not, and the whole point is that you don't, because they're built so deeply into you, these innate psychological and archetypal foundations. And this is something I've heard someone talk about too, like you don't even realize how much of the entire way that we think about the world, not just the things we do in the world, but what we think about the world, has to do with like the fact that we have hands, and if you look at the way the body is wired, how much of us is wired into our total nervous system is designed around our eyes and our hands, around seeing and manipulating. And it's like, well, a dolphin would approach things somewhat differently. I mean, they're way closer to us than some other animals, and they have these sort of pod pack familial relationships that are more similar. And we can look at dogs who operate similarly. It's like, well, they have a very particular character. And you look at other animals like, oh, they're so funny. They're so weird. They're so weird because they're very different from us. They're clearly operating from very different fundamental assumptions, fundamentally different embodiment, fundamentally different approaches. We have this deep character. We are, for one thing, we're mammals. we're weird mammals. We're pack mammals, like wolves. We're exceptionally familial. We're radically familial compared to some animals. And we're also, even among the mammals, which are very, very familial compared to other types of creatures, we're part of a pretty small subset, like the subset where the males are fairly maternal, like they actually take part in the raising of children. It's only like 5% of all mammals. It's a very small group. We have a really distinct character. We're not just some default. We're weird. Everything else is pretty different. We are particular, and it's this particularity that makes us who we are, but also gives us the power that we have. And whatever power we exercise comes through these channels, because these are the things that have been built into us. These are the foundations of our power as humans, that we have this distinct character, this distinct way of being. Not just power over the world, but also over one another, over this inner world that we inhabit as pack animals, far more than other living things. Because so much of what we actually inhabit as pack animals is each other, the relationships between each other. That is our power. That is what makes a pack of wolves far more dangerous than any single predator could ever be. But the thing is, everything we do is built on these most basic things. So all of society, all law, they're all built on the innate power and structure of the pack and of the characters and members that make up the pack, including things like the investment of ultimate power into an authority figure for the purpose of protecting the young and vulnerable. A lizard wouldn't do that, because lizards don't do that. Apart from the fact that they're not conscious, a turtle just lays an egg on the beach and leaves. This isn't part of their universe. This is not part of their power. Their power is, well, let's lay 100 eggs and just see what happens. No, that's not how us mammals do. Our power comes differently. One of our powers, one of our innate technologies, is we invest ultimate power into an authority figure to protect the young and vulnerable. Well, we still have that power. And you know what? We found out we can do other stuff with it. We can build other things. We can run other things. We can scale it up. We can abstract it. We can dislocate it. And so it's a powerful justification. And it is a justification for power. So this isn't just the will to parental authority that we possess. That's not just authority. It's one of the most primary and fundamental sources of all authority. It's not the only source from which all concepts of authority give rise, but it is one of the strongest and most essential ones. It is one of the biggest ones. And you can build a civilization on that. You could build a law, a government, a culture. You can build a justification for all kinds of authority and action and all kinds of judgments and all kinds of decided action. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that society you build on that is going to be stable or wise or infallible, but it is going to be strong.